When a school asks something about this, they're really trying to figure out kind of if you're a good fit, if what they offer is what you're looking for. But I need the context of who you are and what makes you you before we get into your YPA. So thank you guys for doing that correctly. Hi guys, welcome to our first live mock interview of this cycle. So it is interview season. We're seeing a lot of people getting interviews, and that's very exciting, but I know it's also nerve-wracking. So we have two people who have graciously volunteered to be here on this holiday weekend and practice with you guys, and they have interviews coming up. So it's kind of your job to be their hype squad and for us also to give feedback on how they answer, what their answers are, to help them improve, and then hopefully get accepted and let us know so that we can all celebrate. But thank you guys for being here. There's a new channel. If you've been to one of our webinars before, you may notice there's one on the side called Give Feedback. So we have Introduce Yourself, and we're seeing people from all over. Thank you guys for contributing. We have a question one, which we probably won't get to too much tonight, but we will definitely answer those on social media. And then in our Give Feedback, that's where your job is to be the interviewer. And as we're going through questions in just a little bit, share your feedback. The people who are here, Christina and Sydney, they are, wanting to know how they're doing, and everyone's opinion is so helpful. If you are in Pre-PA Academy, I don't know if anyone from there is in here right now. We've started doing live mock interviews in that, and that's our group coaching program. You can learn just as much from watching someone else go through practice and hear what questions they have as you can getting your own practice. So take that mindset into this as we go through things. You may hear things that aren't necessarily relevant to you, but you can put a spin on it that makes it fit for you. So we will get into it in just a minute. A couple of housekeeping things. There will be a replay, so if you can't hang out, that's totally fine. It'll go up on YouTube this week, and so you can refer back to it, and you'll get an email with that link for you. If you have any technical difficulties, we found that Google Chrome works best, and just refresh. Let us know in the chat if you are having difficulties. We were just talking about all the crazy storms happening, and luckily in Georgia, we've been okay so far, but you never know. Like, it could start thundering and lightning any minute. So if there's any issues on your ends, let us know. We do have a couple webinars coming up, and as long as you signed up for this one, I think you should get emails about those as well if you want to attend. Avery is coming back to do another presentation. If was anyone at Avery's first presentation, it was fantastic. She is one of our TAs for Academy. She's a current PA student, but she's amazing. But she's talking about MMI specifically, with mastering the MMI, on July 24th at 8 p.m. Eastern. So mine are at 8:30, hers are at 8, just so that you take note of that. But we'll put that link in the chat so that you can sign up for that webinar. When we talked about planning, we just felt like MMI really needed its own session because it's a lot. So she went through that interview process recently, last cycle. She interviewed at 5 or 6 programs. So she, knows what she's talking about and can share a lot more on that. So that will be on July 24th. And then on July 31st at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, we will do a webinar with Kristen from Strive from Kristen. Well, actually now she's Millionaires in Medicine, talking about finances and PA school on a budget. So she is going to be diving into everything to do with student loans, especially with all of the changes that everyone's talking about that we don't really know exactly how that's going to affect graduate school. She is more of an expert than I am, and so she is going to give us all of her info, answer all of your questions, and talk through how you can be prepared for PA school and affording it, because the financial side is really important, and it's not something that we talk about as much before going into PA school. And I think for me, it's just not necessarily feeling that I'm the most knowledgeable in that area. So that's why I'm bringing someone in who is. And then in August, we'll pick up again with our live mock interviews and keep going with those through interview season. So that's a lot. We have some exciting things coming up. I also want to let y'all know that we are doing MapTCon again. Did anybody go to MapTCon last year, the virtual one? It's going to be virtual. It's on September 13th. We would love to have you attend. It's an all-day virtual conference, and we had an admissions panel last year. We'll have that again this year, talking to people who work at PA schools, like, what are they called? Directors, admissions directors, that kind of stuff. We'll go through a lot of stuff having to do with the PA school application process, which some of you have already done, but we'll talk about interviews, and we'll have some really great resources there. So you can go to mappedcon.com and sign up for that if you would like to attend, and we'll have some really fun giveaways. We're working on those right now. So there's a lot. It's a lot coming up, but we're in the thick of it. I know you guys are in the thick of it. The question I have for y'all is, who has interviews? And if you have an interview, is it virtual or in person? That's what I was just talking about with Christina and Sydney. Both of their interviews, or all of their interviews that they have coming up so far, are in person. Last year, I felt like that was a pretty even split between virtual and in person, but I'm just not sure where the schools are going to stand this year. So I'm seeing in person, a lot of in person, a couple virtual, but a lot of in person. Okay. Wow. I'm actually shocked. Oh yeah. And now we have a poll up. That's perfect. Virtual, 2 online this month and in person next month. Okay. So still some virtual, but a lot of in person. I think there's so many benefits to going to an in-person interview, because you do get to actually see the school and see the students and everything, which is amazing. But the convenience of virtual is so nice. So I see both sides completely. Last year, we also saw schools offering both, like you could choose between in-person or virtual. So also interested to see if that's going to happen this year. So, okay, cool. Thank you guys for sharing. Let me see if I close this. Will it show the poll results? So, okay, 78% said in person, and then 22% said virtual. Wow. Sweet. Okay. So let's talk about mock interviews for a second before we start these. You may have watched some of our live mock interviews in the past on YouTube. So for mock interviews, myself and other coaches, the way we approach this is that we want your interview with us to be as real and as close to the real thing as possible. If it's in person, clearly that's going to be a little bit different. But some of the benefits that we have is I've been doing this for 10 years. And so we have a fairly extensive database of information about schools. And so when you tell us where you're interviewing, we can make your interview very personalized. If you don't have an interview yet, that's okay too. And you can go ahead and start practicing. If you have submitted your application and you're in that waiting phase, you need to be practicing. And that's recording yourself, doing all the things Avery said last time, and that replays on YouTube, and talking out loud to another person. So that's where the mock interviews come in. So if you need help with that, we are happy to help. You can use the code FUTUREPA and sign up on the website. I will tell y'all that weekends and evenings go very quickly. So if you know that you need a weekend or an evening time, sign up sooner rather than later. Because we can do like I'll tell y'all a secret since you're here. If you don't see a time that works, email me and I'll get in touch with the coaches and see if there's a time that works. We'll try to work it out. But sometimes that doesn't work, especially if it's 10 p.m. the night before your interview. I'm probably going to be like, hey, you need to go to sleep. But sometimes schools will give you not a lot of heads up, like a week, 2 weeks. I mean, it can be very short notice. And so you want to go ahead and already have those preparations in progress. I think that's the main thing. Oh, and then this is the interview guide. Oh gosh. If you are wanting to start your practice and you don't know where to start, I would recommend this or the PA School interview guide, which we just dropped the price on, just to make it more accessible. So these are good things to start with, but I do want you practicing out loud. So you can take the questions in here. I don't give you what to say, like the exact answers, but I tell you how to think about the questions, and you can video yourself doing it, watch it back, and see how you do. And then kind of go from there. There's like mock interview guides in here too. So we can put that link in the chat as well. It's just on Amazon. I used to ship them and I don't ship them anymore because that was way too many books to ship. I couldn't do it. Okay. Oh, cool, Gabriella. That's awesome. Hopefully It came quickly. And that's what I was thinking, because Prime Day is in like 2 days, and sometimes that makes them slow down printing and shipping of the books. So if you want one, I would order it before Prime Day just so you don't run into that. All right, I'm going to bring Christina up as our first guest volunteer. You'll notice during the interview, we're going to jump into questions. I'm going to ask her some questions. I'll be taking notes while we do that. Typically, I type them, but it can be like, I don't want it to be loud for you guys. So for the purposes of this, I have my trusty notebook. I'm going to take some notes so that afterwards we can go through feedback. And that's what happens in a mock interview is we go through questions, and then afterwards we stop and we talk about it. We talk about what you did well, what you can work on, and then from your application, because we have you send us your CASPA, things that you could incorporate potentially as well. Okay. Hi. Welcome. Thank you again for volunteering your time to practice with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna scoot that up a little bit so I can see everything. And just because we were just talking about it, how much notice did you get on your interviews? I know you have 2 coming up.
Yeah, so the first one, which is coming up soon, I had 3 weeks notice. And then the next one also had a virtual and in-person option. And the virtual was before the in-person, and that's the first week of October. So I have a lot, which is
a lot of time. Wow, yeah. They must be super organized and like have everything together. Yeah. I mean, that's very impressive. All right. And have you interviewed anywhere previously, just for everyone?
Yeah, I have had 3 interviews from last cycle, and then Eastern Virginia is also part of last cycle. So they're kind of one of the late starters for that. But so 4 total for last cycle.
Okay. Is there anything that you feel like you did well or that you need to work on?
In the previous interviews, because it was kind of a 50-50 split, in person, I felt like I just wasn't quite comfortable enough, just kind of being myself and showing up. And the virtual was really hard because you can't like vibe off the other person very much. And that was a little harder to read, and also harder to like let your personality show. Even though we've been virtual for so long, it seems like it's still kind of awkward and weird. But in person, I really enjoyed those more.
Okay. Well, we'll be looking out for some of that as we jump in here. So it looks like you'll be getting a little bit of everything, to be honest. Some traditional interview, maybe some group, and then some MMI. So that's, we always say prepare for everything. Prepare. You never know what they're going to give you. But yeah, it does look like you'll get a little bit of everything. All right. So let's just jump in and tell us a little bit about who you are and where you come from.
Yeah, sounds good. So my name's Christina, and I live in Colorado, where I currently work for an orthopedic clinic, where I manage their DME program. And part of that is being a clinical assistant as well. So I get a lot of good patient contact with them. And then I also work part-time as a EMT at an urgent care, which has been great for building clinical skills and that kind of stuff. I moved here from Lake Tahoe, where I went to school at the University of Nevada, where I was also a dual sport athlete. And I grew up in West Central Idaho, up in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, and enjoyed everything outdoors. So now in my free time, I also volunteer for a horse center where we rehabilitate rescue horses for adoption. And that's where I spend most of my time when I'm not in clinic.
Okay. So it sounds like you've done a lot of different things and kind of had a lot of experience. What led you to choosing PA over any other profession?
Yeah, so I'm a second career applicant as well. I spent 18 years coaching elite level ski racing. So coaching people is something that I really love doing. And I actually had a work injury where I ended up seeing a PA and a surgeon, and the PA really just had a positive impact on me and kind of introduced me to the process and what it's like being a PA. And then I started working for them shortly after, shadowing with her a couple of times in the OR and in clinic. And I just thought it was so cool that she could do so many different things and had so much clinical knowledge. And her skills in the OR were really cool to watch, like suturing and things like that. And then the teamwork too between the provider and the PA, that was really impactful. And they just encouraged me to pursue this career for the last, I would say, 10 years. But I really loved my job before, and now I'm just fully committed to becoming a PA. I went back to school and got an additional degree in health sciences so that I could continue on this journey.
Had you ever thought about medicine before?
I have thought about medicine my entire life. My dad had an old Grey's Anatomy book from probably the 60s or 70s, and I used to read it for fun. I'm not sure why. I couldn't tell you anything at this point, but yeah, I've always been intrigued by medicine, and we grew up in a really rural area and we didn't have access to a lot. So I was always wondering, how can medicine be better? How can we have more of what we need in such a small area? And I got my EMT in 2010 with the intention of continuing to step into medicine, and then finally got the opportunity to switch careers. So.
Okay. You mentioned your community and background. So how have you at this point impacted your community, and how does that translate into your goals as a PA?
Yeah, where I live is considered rural. We're right on the I-70 corridor up in the mountains, so we're about 2 hours from Denver. And a lot of the care that our patients need is pretty limited. And we're really lucky to have orthopedic surgeons up here who love living in this area and love the outdoor lifestyle, and taking care of those patients and making sure that they can continue doing what they love doing up here in the mountains has been really special. And then again, in urgent care, we're able to help people get back out doing what they love to do.
Okay. Tell me about a time that you were disappointed in yourself.
Gosh. I would say probably most recently forgetting to tell a provider an important piece of information. It was an allergy to a medication that would have had a pretty big impact if we had given it to them. Luckily, I was able to catch it, but I beat myself up for it for a couple of weeks. Everything turned out fine. There was no drug interaction, but it's one of those things that you just have to be diligent about and remember to ask all the questions.
When you think about PAs, what is it that you think makes a PA successful?
The PAs that I get to work with are extremely compassionate toward their patients, and they're able to put themselves in the patient's shoes and really have that connection with them. And so having that compassion and empathy toward the patient situation is important, but also being well educated and understanding that there might be something that they don't know and they have to ask. So being humble and knowing that you don't know everything, I think, is really important. And the PAs that I've gotten to work with definitely have those characteristics.
If you could change one thing about the PA profession, what would you change?
I really like the way that the state compact legislation is going and being able to transfer licensure across state lines. I think that's probably one of the biggest benefits right now, not knowing the future, obviously. But life happens and you have to move, or maybe your practice gets shut down, or something like that. And who knows what the situation is, but being able to take your knowledge and experience to another location in another state, perhaps, or even in a different discipline altogether, and specialize in another area. That's really interesting to me in comparison to what physicians can do.
How would you say that you learn the best?
Definitely experience. I like to be hands-on, making up stories about whatever it is that we're studying at the time, and having a connection in some other way other than just reading chapters. That's not really my vibe. I like to have the experience of the thing that we're studying, and being able to have visual and tactile feedback.
All right, let's stop there and we'll talk through them. How are you feeling?
Good. Always a little nervous, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Well, yeah, and that's totally fine. And I feel like after an interview, I kind of black out and I'm like, wait, what did I say? And what was I asked? I don't even know at this point. Is there anything that you felt like threw you off or you were unsure about? We'll go through each one, so it's okay if you don't remember.
Nothing stands out right now.
Okay.
Probably.
And we'll go to the feedback channel. But overall, I think you did fantastic. I felt, and I'll tell you these things as we go through, but I felt that you were confident and so I've seen your application. And the one thing, just for people watching to remember, is that whoever's interviewing you may not have seen your application. They may have it in front of them, but like I think both of y'all's were like 40 something pages. They're crazy long. Like they're not sitting there going through it and reading everything. Some schools will give them a summary page about you. But I have a friend who interviews for one of those programs, and she said the stuff that they'll write on there is completely random and a lot of times not very helpful. Like it'll just say, was a swimmer, works in a PT office, and like that's it. And she doesn't know what to do with that. So you just never know what information your interviewer has. So always feel free to expand on things that are on your application, give a little context, give a little background. If you'd like, that would be helpful. Just you can do that. Like I'm giving you permission. Sometimes you're like, repeat something I said, or I can't say something that was in my personal statement, and you totally can. You definitely can. All right, we'll jump back to the beginning. I'm going to look at my notes here. I'm trying to see where people are talking. Okay, I think I'm going to have to go back to the questions after. I'm going to stay in the feedback channel for now. All right. So we started with tell me about yourself, a variation of that. And something that I think is really important when you're preparing and practicing, especially if you haven't had interviews yet, is not preparing for a certain question to be asked a certain way, just because you never know how they're going to ask it. So they could like put a little variation on it and still be asking you kind of the same thing, but clearly like ask you about yourself. I love that you introduced yourself with your name and where you're from. So again, even though they may have that information, I think there's power in making that introduction to where you are helping them to remember your face with your name. Did you have to submit a picture or take a picture at any of your interviews?
A few of them, yeah. And I was like, what kind of photo do you want? Just a white background? What am I okay like this? What do you want?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything intense. Like I had somebody who was like, I paid for a full-on headshot photo shoot for this. You don't have to do that. Like go on your back porch, go outside, get against a white wall. and you can take a picture if they ask you to submit it. But if you're like, why do they want a picture of me? It's because when they go back and they talk about you, they may not, like, they've just talked to 10 to 20 new people, and so they want to remember your face. So if you're kind of helping them with that connection, I think it's helpful. So yeah, I think your intro was good. Then you got into some of your experience, like what you're doing now, working in the ortho clinic and the, like, working as an EMT at urgent care. I can't read my handwriting, but basically I said I think you did a good job of kind of incorporating all of that and showing that you are working hard and doing all these things versus just saying like, oh, I'm doing this. You're able to kind of really, I feel like, explain what you're doing. Somebody said they had to look up what a DME is. So you may want to explain what that acronym is when telling them about yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're getting some good feedback. We'll go through that. And then I feel like you got better at this. I feel like at the beginning you were kind of thinking about what you're saying more, which is such a natural thing to do. Like you start to think about how you want to say things, or I won't say the words you're saying, but kind of like it felt like you were kind of thinking through it. And then it got way more natural and just talking and, actually showing yourself more as we went. But yeah, I think you did a good job there, adding even more personal details about like being an athlete, where you're from. So I think you covered that one completely. So when we get into, YPA, and for an applicant like you who is a second career, I think it is important to show why you're making the switch.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, and you didn't necessarily go into this, or was the injury why you stopped coaching, or no?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't really talk about that.
Okay.
And I've gone back and forth. I've done it both ways.
Okay.
And I got mixed reviews both ways. So
That's okay. That's okay.
Right.
So I think and that's what. So we'll go through it, and then we can kind of maybe talk through that. Because the things, especially as a second career or like making a switch, that I look for, or like even if you're switching, you want to go to med school and now you're wanting to go to this. I think what I kind of look for is like why you weren't satisfied in what you're doing, like why, like what that was. And so I think that's why I kind of followed it up with like, had you thought about medicine before, or was this just something new, or kind of trying to maybe tease that out a little bit. So I almost think if you incorporated that in there, some of like, I had always considered medicine, but this is life took me as an athlete and doing this thing I loved, which is awesome. But then, having an injury, realizing that there may be a deadline on that, I started looking into, that kind of brought me back to medicine. I'm putting words in your mouth, but kind of just showing how you could navigate that a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think in one of my interviews, I said that my position with the ski team was eliminated. And so I reached out to a friend in the clinic and got a job. And then I was like, why haven't I done this before?
Yeah. Well, and I think that that makes sense. That kind of explains some of that. But even then, like I think you could just like help them to know that seed was always there. Like it wasn't completely random. Like you had kind of already had that thought. And then, I think it sounds like you have a ton of support, a ton of encouragement, which is very nice and helpful as far as coming from where you work. And then like it was cool how you got into shadowing and working. One part I also wanted just a little bit more was you made a comment. I'm trying to remember exactly how it went, but something about how the teamwork aspect was very impactful for you. But I want just like a little bit more about why that was impactful for you, because with these YPA explanations, it gets very easy to throw out some of the buzzwords about it. I feel like you had a great understanding of the PA profession from both this question and one of the ones later on. But I think being able to maybe say, like, I had coached a team, I've led a team, I've been on a team, and that's a part, of that's something that I enjoy, that I want to continue in my profession. Just adding that personal connection to why that is specifically important to you.
Yeah, makes sense.
I feel like it's hard to, like, I have to try to explain it, and
I feel like I wrote about it in one of my essays, and I just have to remember some of those key points.
Yeah, and for everyone watching, like, definitely go back and read your application and your essays and your supplementals. You can download them from CASPA, but definitely read back through everything you sent there. Look at your transcripts, look at your grades. They can pull anything all from your application. So you definitely want to kind of refresh on that before you get to the interview as well. Okay, so then we got into your impact in your community and your goals as a PA. And I think, being able to explain your background, being from a rural setting, and then getting into some of kind of like how y'all have already been able to reach some of those patients. I think you could take it a little bit further. This is kind of the same as, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And, where are you going with this? And so thinking about, I feel like you wrote about this too. I think it's in your personal statement, actually. Yeah, like the second or third paragraph, where you talked about how, like, you also had a high Medicaid population, and that was something like you strongly, like, advocated for patients getting care. So I think being able to say, like, like, working with this type of patient population in a specialty clinic, trying to provide care to people who, like you said, need it to do the things they love to do, or their work. I see myself in the future maybe being in a similar role, maybe being in a different role, kind of take it that step further to how you plan to advocate for patients or PAs, or, the area, whatever that looks like for you.
Makes sense. Sometimes I feel rushed.
Yeah, which I think, and I would say it's interesting because your first couple answers were longer, and then they just got shorter and shorter. Did you, like, you just, like, didn't have time, like, that you were running out of time?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, so don't. Okay, my caveat to that is, you have time, and you probably aren't talking as long as you think you are.
Yeah, for sure.
So as you practice, video yourself. Everyone hates it. I hate it. I don't watch these back ever. But video yourself and see how long you're talking. Because when we're practicing for MMI and mock interviews, a lot of times we'll time you, and people are talking 30 to 45 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, maybe if they push it, they'll get to 2 minutes or so. I've had a very small handful of people. There's one guy I remember completely that I did have to, like, stop him and cut him off. But rarely do I ever have to be like, all right, you're out of time. So you have time, and I would just go on, if you are providing new information, keep talking. And on the flip side of that, you don't know what they're going to ask you. And so I've also had people who emailed me, and they're like, my interview was 5 minutes and they asked me 3 things and then it was over. So if they have 3 questions on their list to ask you, and you give shorter answers, like, then that might just be all they ask you, and then that's it. Or some of them ask a million questions and they're an hour long, but you just never know. So I would say err on, if you see an opportunity to provide information, try to incorporate it if you can, if it's new information. And that is hard when you've done a lot of different things and have a lot to share.
Yeah.
Okay. Flipping to the back here. I'll show y'all how bad my handwriting is. It's so bad. You can't see it. I disappeared. That's one. It's like an invisibility cloak. Okay, so as we get into, tell me about a time you were disappointed in yourself.
Yeah.
And I saw something in the comments, and I agree. I think you could take this one a little bit further.
I wasn't really sure how to answer it, because there's so many things that you can be disappointed by in yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I honestly, I'm gonna be honest, I came up with that question on the fly. That was not what I had planned to ask.
That one.
But so when I'm in a mock interview, this goes a couple ways. If somebody is doing well, my questions get progressively like either harder or off the wall because I just want to.
Noted.
So that was one that I was like, let's just see how this goes. But it is a good example. So tell me about, and then whatever it is, tell me about a time you're disappointed in yourself, though, I think is a good example of, like you said, a way you can take a question in so many directions.
Mm-hmm.
It can be work, it can be academics, it can be personal. Just me right now, I can think of multiple answers. And so ultimately you have to pick one, and it needs to be, something you can explain, and something that you can show a lesson from, which then again, when we're in this situation, like, so it's funny, in the comments was that I was intimidated by that question.
Yeah.
How do you bring up something that is relevant but not alarming? And then, yeah, I mean, that seems to be the question that other people have commented on the most. So I think I appreciate that your answer was extremely honest, and I think it shows, your ethics in that situation. I think you could have expanded more on the situation in the story a little bit. And keep in mind with anything in essays or interviews that your audience is medical. And so you can give, if you feel comfortable, a little bit of information just to help them understand the situation. Because if it's me and I hear you say something, like if you're referring to a medical illness or event or something that happened, I'm automatically going to assume it was really bad, unless you don't like, and usually it's not as bad as what, like, it's okay, and so, like, I think you could make this a little bit more, this type of answer, this type of question, a little bit more anecdotal. If you kind of give a little bit more background of, clinic was really busy that day, or the patient was, not providing as much information, or whatever. I switched places with somebody, whatever happened. Normally when I give report, this is kind of how I do it. But that day, I forgot that the patient had an allergy to penicillin. And luckily, I would want to understand more of how you caught it. Like, did you remember? How did you handle it? Because that is going to tell me, if people are like, oh, I don't know if that, like, I would be that honest. But that does tell me a lot about you as a provider and a PA, because we all make mistakes. It happens. Whether somebody is allergic to someone, they're pregnant, they're breastfeeding, and you give them something, you just never know. So I think you said kind of, you've got to be diligent, you've got to ask questions, but I would just like a little bit more there as well of, like, what did you learn? What are you doing differently now?
Yeah.
And how is that going to impact you as a student and PA? I think it's fine to say, I realize we're all going to make mistakes and overlook things, but the standard that I want to have, this was eye-opening to me, that's something I want to be very aware of, and make sure that, I'm on top of things as much as possible, to kind of cover that. But yeah, I think other examples, like, that would be a good time to bring up a class that you maybe studied for or didn't study for as hard as you could have, and you didn't do as well, or a rough semester. I think of even, like, things as simple as, my daughter was in camp this week and she asked me to give her $2 for the snack stand on Tuesday, and I completely forgot to bring the money. And so we got there and it was a huge ordeal. And I felt terrible. And, my takeaway from that is that I have to realize that I'm a human. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to forget things, but better ways to not forget them. And I have to do things when I say I'm going to. So whether that's in my office or working with patients, doing something for someone in the office, that's something that was eye-opening to me. So whatever your thing that comes to mind is, it probably works there, or you can shape shift it enough to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So what makes a successful PA? I thought your answer to this was fantastic. Gave me lots of qualities kind of pulled from your experience. And this, I already kind of had that feeling of you have a really good understanding of PAs, but this definitely solidified it. It was like, all right, you understand this profession, you understand what PAs are, what we do. And I felt that was a very confident answer, which I think that one even sometimes trips people up a little bit, just because it's easy to list off a bunch of things, but not necessarily mean them or have that background to be able to support it. We'll come back to that in a second. So asking you how you learn best. And I think this is one that goes along with wherever you're applying. So knowing what their teaching style is,
Mm-hmm.
And basically being able to kind of echo how that type of teaching impacts your learning. When a school asks something about this, they're really trying to figure out kind of if you're a good fit, if what they offer is what you're looking for, and what kind of student you're going to be in the setting that they offer. So I think, you gave some good discussion of being kind of a hands-on experiential learner, gave us some examples there as well. And so I felt like that answer was good. I think you could potentially, I talked about things being full circle, like bring it back to, stating, I feel like as a PA student, I'm going to be able to make up these stories and apply this knowledge as I did in my degree, and continue as I have in my job, and bring that with me into PA school.
Yeah, and maybe even tying it to a class that like pathology.
And bring a way that, like, if you have an example of how it's helped you in a class, and then how you can relate that to like certain stuff in PA school. Pharmacology now, especially, like, that's huge, the whole like story and example thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just because that's so hard to learn. But I think being the more stories, the more examples you can incorporate, the better. That just makes you more and more memorable, to the programs. So definitely that. And then I asked, if there's one thing you could change about the PA profession, what would you change? This one felt a little bit muddy to me. Just okay, like, I don't know. She might have answered that, but I'm not completely sure she did. So I think, did fine. But if you can have just a very clear, reason, and it's okay to take a second to think about it too, and like organize your thoughts a little bit. And so I think, you told me what you know about some things about the PA profession, but I don't know that you actually told me what you would change.
Yeah, I think where I was going was probably that more states would enter the compact and make it easier for PAs, but I never.
Okay. We just didn't quite get there. Got it.
Never got there.
That's okay. Those questions also tend to make people a little bit nervous.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably, I feel that because we've had providers come from other states and they have to get re-credentialed in Colorado because they're not part of the compact yet, and it's been so painful because it takes forever. It's like it could take a month for that to happen.
Oh yeah, I mean, even in Georgia, like, I have a friend who just switched practices, and they told her it'll be probably 3 months before she's able to see patients, just from like within the state, going to a new practice and getting re-credentialed and everything. And it's not a hospital system or anything. So that process is crazy. So I think that's a good answer. But you could just add more and use that personal anecdote and everything, and that explains a little bit more. So that, if you have a backup story to kind of show what you're what you're saying, I think that is helpful.
Okay. More stories.
More stories. Yeah. More stories, more examples, but you seem genuine, seem confident. I feel like you're definitely on the right track, and just kind of continuing to think through, I talk about it like, and people here may have heard this before too, but like I'm a very visualizing person. So in my head, it's like you have a checklist of the things that you want to tell them. And as you check one off, you don't bring that up again and you bring up something else. And so slowly you're just telling them more and more about yourself and going down your list. And you're not going to hit everything, and that's okay. But if you have this list of, I want to tell them I was a ski coach, that teamwork is important to me, that I've worked in this clinic, that I know what a PA is, like all these things that you can pull from, that will be, it just kind of streamlines it so you're not like searching all over all of your experience for all these things if you kind of have your top things you want to tell them.
Yeah.
So cool. Maybe that's helpful to somebody. I don't know. Well, thank you for volunteering.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. All right, we'll jump over to Sydney. You got some great comments in the feedback, Christina, too. So you want to scroll through those. Somebody asked if we track information on how quickly programs provide feedback. We don't. All of this stuff changes so much every single year, depending on who is in charge of admissions or the director. So it would just change too much, and it's hard enough to keep up with info on 300 programs per match. So unfortunately, we do not. Sydney is our second volunteer, and she is a reapplicant who also has an in-person interview. So, and she happens to be in Georgia like me.
Hey.
Hi. How are you feeling?
I'm glad I went second.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna ask you the exact same questions. Just kidding. I'm gonna ask you all the questions. But it's not scary. And you said you interviewed last cycle.
Yes, ma'am. I had one in-person interview and one virtual interview, and I definitely like the in-person a lot better. It's definitely, like Christina said, it's hard to kind of get how they're feeling about you whenever you're talking through a computer screen. So
yeah, I feel that, and I mean it's great that schools are getting back to in person. I think they felt like virtual was easier, but then I do think a lot of applicants wanted in person, and we're coming and trying to do visits anyway. So I don't know if that's part of it, but yeah, definitely makes it a little bit more fun too, and you get to go kind of see where you're potentially going to go to school and all of that. Well, we'll jump in. We'll do some more. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, and then we'll talk about them afterwards. From last cycle, I asked Christina this, but is there anything specific that you want to work on or that you feel like you struggled with?
My patient care experience last cycle, I was still an undergrad, so my patient care experience wasn't as great as I felt like it could have been. Okay. But as soon as I graduated in December, I got a job working, 40 hours a week with patient care. So I definitely feel like that's boosted my confidence in dealing with patients. And I felt like that was the area that I lacked the most, especially like all the forums I'm seeing like 30,000 hours here. And I'm like, oh, okay. I have nowhere near that. So I definitely feel like I'm more competitive as an applicant now.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think, just continuing to work on all the parts of your application. Your application is very well-rounded though. I think like I looked at it before. I know the people watching can't see that, but we'll get into all of that. And Small World we were talking about before, but Sydney shadowed a PA that I went to school with. So we were talking about how the PA community is so small and you end up knowing a lot of people. And so that's a really cool part to me being a PA is whether I've like know someone who knows somebody or PAs I've met virtually that I meet in person. There is a lot of networking and getting to know people in the space, which is fun. Okay, let's jump in. and get into a little intro. If you could just tell us about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, my name is Sydney, and I'm from a very small town in Dexter, or called Dexter, Georgia. We don't have a traffic light, and there's more cows than people. So that's definitely, I love the country life. I just graduated from Georgia Southwestern in December, majored in biology there. It's also a pretty small town in America, so I'm definitely passionate and love the rural atmosphere and love rural medicine. I shadowed a lot in neurosurgery and immuno um, immunology as allergy, asthma, cardiothoracic, and I just liked the rural aspect. Whenever we would get away from the hospital and go out to the smaller town clinics, that was something I was very passionate about. In my spare time, I love volunteering with my church. I'm on the nursery rotation, so our church is growing a lot. So we went from having like 5 babies to 15. So nursery's no longer as relaxing as it once was, but I love, getting to volunteer and giving parents that break to, really just further their relationship with God. I have 2 dogs. They're about 150 pounds each, and they're my pride and joy. So that's usually what I'm doing when I'm not at work. I currently am an ophthalmic technician, so I work with optometrists and ophthalmologists in the clinic and in surgery. So anything from a basic, glasses, prescription contact evaluation to blepharoplasties, cataracts, LASIK surgery is all part of my day-to-day job.
Nice. Okay. So I know you said you just graduated and you're a bio major and working in ophthalmology now. When did you decide you wanted to become a PA, and what steps have you taken towards that?
So my first experience with a PA was not a good one. The PA missed a very crucial diagnosis. I struggled when I was younger with an eating disorder, and the PA told me to eat bacon for breakfast and just keep praying about it instead of admitting me to a hospital. I had a fight, I was given about 2 weeks to live because of that misdiagnosis. I kept going and spiraling. So that was in my hometown. I had to drive 3 hours to go to the hospital to get admitted. So that was really an eye-opening experience. And once I got to the other side of that, I realized that I never wanted someone to go through what I went through. Just the lack of knowledge and awareness for different mental disorders and the dismissive nature of it. And so I was like, who was that? How did they miss that? So I started going back and I was like, oh, well, what is a PA? And I was like, there's no way that should have been missed. So my goal was to not only become that, but be something better than I experienced and make sure that no one else has to go through what I went through. And that was how I was first introduced to the profession. And throughout college, I kind of toyed with the idea. I was like, I kind of like it. Let me shadow. So I reached out and I fell in love with it, with shadowing. I love the collaborative nature of being a PA. I like how it's team-based healthcare, but there's also some autonomy there as well. And depending on the specialties, there's a lot more autonomy in allergy and asthma than there is in neurosurgery. So just seeing how the roles are so diverse is also something I fell in love with.
Okay. Did you consider any other careers in medicine?
Yes, when I first graduated high school, I was accepted into a BSM program. I knew that was never the goal for me, was to be a nurse. It was kind of when I graduated high school, I graduated in 2021 and I had already graduated with my associate's degree. And the world was kind of going a little crazy in 2021. Everything was still shut down from COVID. And my mom was like, there's nothing you can do with a biology degree. You don't know if there's anything if you can even go to PA school, with all of the COVID that's going on. So why don't you just stay home for a few years? And since I had already finished my core, the only thing that I really could do was nursing. I was like, I did 2 semesters. I was like, this is not the model that I want to be. And so I transitioned back into my original plan for biology and PA.
Okay, you mentioned that you didn't like the model. What differences do you see in the nursing versus the medical model that PAs are trained on?
So the nursing model I felt like was more symptomatic based. How can you alleviate the symptoms? And I feel like the medical model really gets to the root of the cause. Like I feel like the nursing model is more you can have an ibuprofen for the foot pain, but the medical model is why you have that foot pain. It might be plantar fasciitis, and so we can get to the PT and the exercises, and that's really I wanted to be part of the solution, not just band-aiding.
Um, Tell me about a time where you had to make a drastic change in your schedule.
When I was in college, oh, I was in high school and college doing dual enrollment, and that was my first semester in doing dual enrollment when COVID happened. So I went from having online classes in high school or in-person classes and in-person classes in college to having online classes in college and not having anything in high school, but still having to take AP exams and, the state mandated testing. So I went from, 8 to 3 to a completely open schedule minus a few college classes. And so my whole schedule was turned upside down. And that was really hard for me. I'm a rigid person. I like a schedule. And that was the first time I feel like my world schedule wise was right upside down, and I definitely grew from it. It was a hard few months there at the beginning, just because of the rural area where I'm at. There's not much access to internet, so trying to take an online class without internet is not for the faint of heart. So, but that's definitely I would say one of the most major times my schedule has changed.
I know you mentioned enjoying and kind of being drawn to the rural areas where you're from. How did you feel about going to school in a bigger city? Why did you choose to apply here?
I definitely like the exposure of a larger city. There's definitely more resources, and I'll be able to see more medically complex cases. Where I'm from, everything gets flown out to another bigger city or to Emory or to Augusta. Nothing major is treated where I'm at. So I always want to be able to know what to treat and how to treat, and the best way to learn that is for me is personally by watching it and helping, and that's why I would want to go to a bigger university just to get that exposure.
If you had to choose a life motto, what would your motto be?
My life motto would be let go and let God. I'm very spiritual, and a lot of times I struggle with control, and especially applying to PA school, I've learned that I am not in charge, and just trying to realize that in the end, it's up to God. And I'm really big in my faith, and so learning to trust Him is kind of my life motto. He's got me this far, so. um, but yeah, that would be my life motto, is just to let go and let God.
How do you handle stress?
I handle stress a lot better than I used to. I would say I tend to be stressed, but I have gotten into exercise again. Pickleball is something I have gotten into along with everybody else. I'm very competitive, so I always like to win, but that's a great way for me. I also twirl batons. I was a majorette in high school, so in college I had them, and I would just go to the gym and just twirl a few batons. It's hard to think about anything whenever you are juggling stuff, so that was something that definitely kept my mind out of it. Um, I also like to walk, just walk my dogs. 300 pounds of dog is a lot to walk, but that's how I've handled stress. Instead of, I used to box myself and freak out, but I would say about mid college, I was like, this is not the way to go. I can't keep thriving like this. And so I started going outside and touching grass and going and walking the dogs. I didn't have them in college, but playing pickleball or going on a walk or twirling batons. And that's really been helpful for me to find a healthy avenue.
Okay, and then where do you see yourself in 5 years?
In 5 years, I hope to be a practicing PA. I would love to be in a rural setting, just bridging the gap that I have seen personally in healthcare. I would want to be a provider that listens and takes the time throughout, my experience working with, in my practice, there's 5 different providers. They're just seeing how each one takes, scheduling or everything. I want to make sure that I have enough time for my patients and respect their time as well. And so, like, proper scheduling is going to be like a big thing for me. I'm always like, I want to be on time, but I want to respect everybody else's time as well. So just knowing from observing other practices and other providers, I would want to be a provider that, takes time and listens. Even a lot of patients, especially in the elderly population, I've noticed they just need somebody to talk to. And if I can be that person for them that they, maybe like going to the doctor now because they have someone to talk to, that's who I want to be. I basically want to be a shining light in my community, and kind of help be the person that I needed when I was younger.
Okay, let's stop there. How are you feeling?
I'm nervous, but
You're getting good feedback. I'm looking at it now. So being personable, yeah, I agree. Being great, being personable, being phenomenal. Oh wow, now we're making real clappy. I don't know how you did that, but good job. Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing. I agree. I think you did great. I could tell that you got more comfortable as we went along, which is normal completely. And expected. Oh wow. Oh wow. There's a lot more. Okay, so let's go through each one. Was there anything that tripped you up or you felt unsure of? Or you probably don't, or you don't remember.
yeah, I'm kind of I'm like, did I answer everything correctly? Like, I just like kind of like just blacked out now. But
I'm gonna say
I feel like I rambled a lot.
I didn't feel the rambling. That's interesting that you say that because I feel like a lot of people say that when we get done. They're like, I rambled, I rambled. And I, as a person watching, I'm interested to see what others think. I didn't feel that. It felt like others saying very genuine. I felt like it's just kind of more of a conversation, which is ideal. Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's not. But no, I wouldn't necessarily say. I didn't feel the rambling. So I wouldn't try to change that or make that any different. Okay, so yeah, I feel like I didn't think you rambled. There's a little bit of delay when we talk. So okay, yeah, we'll see what others say. But no, I didn't feel that at all. And I felt like your answer length was appropriate. Nothing felt too long or really even too short. So somebody said you were confident in ending your responses. And that can be something difficult that I see people not really do that well is just like stopping. Because when you stop, we're going to ask another question. And that's totally fine to do. So maybe watch it back and see if you still feel like you were rambling whenever it's posted. But I don't think... thorough, not dragged out. I agree. All right, let's go back to the beginning. Tell me about yourself. I think you gave a lot of information here. It could be polished up a little bit, but there's value in also just being yourself and talking. Somebody else said, like, how do we not sound rehearsed? How do we not sound robotic? And that's where I think it goes back to having talking points, but not necessarily having everything mapped out you wanted to say or a response typed out that you're trying to memorize. Like just kind of knowing, I want to talk about where I'm from. I want to talk about my community. I want to talk about my shadowing. I want to talk about just graduating. I want to talk about my dogs. I want to talk about my volunteer experience, which bless you because they keep asking me to do nursery and I keep saying no. I feel so bad, but I'm like, I can't do it, guys. Like, I can't even handle my one baby. I can't handle all these.
I know it's great. You don't have to plan a lesson. If you put on Veggie Tales, you're the coolest thing ever.
My 2-year-old also hates nursery. He just hates people. So he won't go, or if he goes, he just cries the whole time. So that's a current struggle in our church schedule. But you also talked about your experience being ophthalmic tech. I feel like you fit a lot in there. And I thought it was good. Like, I don't think I would change anything, which I think also for y'all who are watching to notice is neither person, Christina nor Sydney, jumped into their YPA here. Sometimes that happens. I'll ask my, like, tell me about yourself. Like, well, I want to be a PA because blah, 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 blah. And that's not what we're asking here. We'll get there, but I need the context of who you are and what makes you you before we get into your YPA. So thank you guys for doing that correctly. All right. So we get into your YPA, and I'm gonna be honest, when I read this in a personal statement or see this in an interview and somebody's like, well, I had a bad experience with PA, I'm always like, oh, where's this gonna go? Where are we gonna end up? This might be bad. Because it's like in medicine, there's this thing about like not throwing somebody else into the bus, even if you agree with what they did or whatever. But I feel like you were able to really turn that around into how it didn't, for a lot of people, if they have a bad medical experience, it just completely turns them off. Like, they don't want anything to do with it. They don't trust doctors anymore. I can say this because this is my sister. She has not only she as a 32-year-old still and she gets blood drawn and so because she went through so much as a child and just didn't feel like medical providers were helping her. And so those experiences can really just shape someone and shape what they want to do. And I feel like but yeah, but I really liked how you're able to kind of shift, and I really appreciate how you were vulnerable and honest enough to share your personal experience. Like, that's not easy, but as someone interviewing you and trying to get to know you, it's appreciated. And I think it gives me more insight into how that's going to affect your patient care. I feel like personal thing we've gone through, either medical or not, helps us have more perspective on the patients that we take care of. Kind of like you mentioned, we have the opportunity to impact so many people. I see when I'm in clinic, like tomorrow, I think I have 41 people on my schedule. And I have the power to try to make their day better and try to serve them. That doesn't mean I always make everyone completely happy or that I can fix their problem the way that they want it fixed. But just going in with that perspective of I'm going to try my best, I'm going to give it everything I have, and really try to listen to that person. I feel like you're, like others were saying, like you're very genuine in that. And in this question specifically, you were able to incorporate talking about the collaborative aspect of being part of a team, as well as I really liked how you brought up your shadowing opportunities and talked about the difference in the level of autonomy. That is so much more impactful than just saying, PAs can be autonomous or PAs can switch specialties. No, you were saying, I like that show Don't Tell. I saw PAs in these different areas and saw how the autonomy level was different. And so there's just a lot of value there. So I appreciate that as well. Okay, we talked about other careers, and we got in, and this kind of gets into that nursing versus medical model. You may not necessarily be asked this or asked like nursing versus PA or nursing versus doctor, medicine, whatever, but be ready for it in case you are. You have, and you can unmute it anytime if you want to, and I'll turn mine off. You have very specific perspective on this as well because you were in a nursing program. And so you really can say, like, I was being taught this way, and I liked how you explained it, like symptoms versus the root cause, or I would just probably say like diagnosing. And so I think, if you can incorporate that even into other parts of your interview, I would try to do that. I specifically asked that to try to get you to bring it up. But I think that is a probably big part of your story that may not completely be clear just looking at your application and transcripts and stuff. And so being able to expand on it would be helpful. What did someone say?
Yeah, in nursing school, I just felt like the answer to everything was call the provider, and I was like, I kind of want to be that. Like, I want to be the one to help, not just notice things, but and that was definitely. I remember coming like back one day from clinical. I was like, yeah, I want to be a PA. Like, that's definitely. I definitely want that. So it was. I was glad I got to experience a lot of different clinical IVs, Foley caths. I got to do all of the things that way, but it was I definitely liked it to know what I want to be.
And that makes sense. And that, I think, going back to what we were talking about with Christina too, showing limitations is very helpful. So being able to show why you feel limited in a certain role, what you're not able to do that being a PA will fulfill or let you do. That's really, it gives that connection that we're looking for, that personal connection to why you want to do this. Like, why you want to commit all this time, all this money, all this effort, probably some tears to do this. Like, it's a lot. It's a big commitment. And so really being able to confidently show that is helpful. Okay, we talked about the drastic change in schedule, which this was a good opportunity to bring up your experience with COVID. And so let's see. So somebody said, oh, I brought up a good point about nurse practitioners can diagnose patients too. Yeah, but I think the difference is as a nurse practitioner, you still have to go down the nursing model. Like, you still have to get your BSN first. And so it is still a little different. And even the nurse practitioner model, if you look up most programs, they are more writing based than test based. And so just the way you're taught, the way you're tested on the information is different. And so kind of that's where the difference once we get to that point comes in. But yeah, I think researching them and kind of continuing to learn about differences is important. And if you've worked with an NP, you could bring that up some, because yeah, out in the real world, when someone's finished NP school, they do look very similar to PAs, especially where we're at in Georgia. PAs and NPs are the same. It's just how you get there that's a little bit different. Okay, going back to drastic schedule, talking about COVID, switching from in-person to online. You've done a really good job of incorporating how you were doing dual enrollment and got your associates while you're in high school, which is crazy and very impressive. Like, they didn't even offer that when I was in school. So I just think that's like the coolest thing that you guys can do. And then talked about liking schedules and, how access was hard, that kind of stuff. The next steps I would try to think about with this or take with this would be how are you going to adjust if you're in PA school and the same thing happens again? Like, are you going to be okay? Can you handle it? Are you going to, you feel like you're good with that? So I would just make sure that with any of these types of questions, tell me about this, you're showing confidence that whatever the issue is, the conflict, the stress, the change in schedule, it's not something that you feel like will affect your progress in PA school or your practice. So being able to say, like, yeah, I know that hopefully this doesn't happen again, but if it does, I have that skill set now to learn online, to adjust, to pivot if needed. Does that make sense? Yeah, somewhat.
Yeah, it does. It was rough, but yeah, like I guess bring more into like what I could do if it happened again. That was one of the answers. I was like, oh, I don't know.
No, I'm talking. Okay, I think you did good. Sorry, I was talking and it wasn't working. Okay, and then I asked you, how do you feel about going to a bigger city? Why did you apply here? And that's what I mean. I think anywhere, but especially if it's different from where you've been, you want to be able to explain that. The people in the chat loved this answer, and I did too, as far as like getting more exposure, learning about different patients, having more resources, kind of seeing that, and then being able to take that back. So I really liked that. I thought that, again, was a very personal, genuine answer. I think you could, like, this would be an opportunity to talk about like things the program offers that you like. You could talk about some things about the city, make it very clear that you are okay to move. Like, I realize I'm going to move for school. It's fine. I'm bringing my dogs with me, whatever. Like, show, I'm okay with this. Like, I'm not going to get here and not be happy. I can come here and live here and be fine. Yeah. Okay. Because a lot of people get to PA school and they're not happy with where they're living. But it's really short. It's only 2 years. Okay. I asked you about your life motto. That was kind of an off the wall question. Sometimes schools will say, like, what's your favorite, what's your song, what's your like movie tagline? Like, who knows what they're gonna ask. And so that was one that just like gets you thinking on your feet. I actually don't even know what I would say if you asked me. I like have nothing. It'd probably be a Taylor Swift quote or something. I don't know. But I really liked your answer. I thought it was very honest. And I like how you expanded on it and said, I struggle with control. That's something I'm working on. You really like PA school applications process has shown me that. And being able to like almost incorporate your weaknesses in here, which I liked the way that you went about that. There's my keyboard. Sorry. Okay. How do you handle stress? You said better than before. So that's good. Got into exercise, pickleball. Like this again, like goes back to what people were saying, like very personable, just being completely honest, sharing about yourself, which I really liked. I think you could kind of going back to some others, like get into some examples and talk about PA school. Like being able to say, I can continue all of this in PA school. Like I'll know that maybe for an hour a day, I need to get outside and walk. I need to continue these habits I've created that help me, feel better, feel less stressed. I'm going to be stressed. I'm recognizing that, but I can handle it because I have these coping mechanisms. And you can even share like a time that you did that. Maybe that was like, maybe if you haven't brought up the COVID stuff yet, you bring that up. You're like, during COVID, I was locked inside. I had to figure out like how to cope with the stress of going to an online school. And so I figured out if I got outside and if I walked, and I'm just spitballing here, but I was able to adjust and move forward with those new habits. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Like, just bring it back into currently, like what I can do in now and in the future. Yeah.
Yes, and just thinking through like, why is this important? Why does it matter? Why are they asking me this? Why do they care if I know how to handle stress? And then going into where do you see yourself in 5 years? So this can be academic, this can be personal, this can be all kinds of stuff. So you gave me a little bit of both of those. So practicing PA, back in a rural setting, bridging that gap, listening to patients, taking time. My one caveat to this one, or like thing to bring up, is there's kind of a fine line between things we wish were the case and also being realistic. And so I think they're like, just toe that line a little bit, because I agree with you. I'm also kind of a stickler, like scheduling and how things run, but I also have to accept that there's so many moving parts that I can't control that as much as I would like to at times. And so it's and I think you can pull from your shadowing and your work experience and being able to say, I've learned a lot about how I would love for things to run, but I also understand that, I may not find that in my first job, but I'll be looking for a job that allows me to have a say in how my patients are scheduled and allows me to spend time with them. Just to make sure there's no kind of like, does she really understand how medicine works? Does she really like know that this is a challenge at times? And so just kind of thinking through some of those points can be helpful, just to make sure, like all the people are like, I want to, help everyone in my whole community. And it's like, we would love to do that, but like, that's not a realistic goal. So you want to make sure you're kind of sticking to those things that are realistic. Does that make sense?
Yes. Would it be appropriate to say like personal things? I know like when I was reading your like interview guide, it was like questionable about like bringing up like getting married or having kids. And I was like, I don't know, like that would ideally I'd have to meet a husband first, but like would that be something to bring up, or like just maybe kind of gauge the room and see?
You make a great point. Read the room and see. I'm always a fan of being honest and just being yourself, and that just made me laugh. So I think being able to say like I would love to be married with kids, but like I'd have to find a husband first, like that's funny to me, and like it shows me to be like the kind of person you'll be with patience. So I think it's comfort level. Read the room, see how it's going. But you could always, I think on the flip side of that, like it shows also like, hey, I like am ready to I can up and move. I'm okay. Like I'm not tied to anybody. And so maybe that's a plus for them. You never know. So I think to me, if you're being your real self at an interview and you're being genuine and you're sharing the things that are important to you, you want a school that values those things. So I know you mentioned your faith a lot in your interview. I also worked with a campus ministry when I was at UGA, and I had on my application, I talked about it in my interview as well and in my personal statement. And I get questions all the time, like, should I bring up working for a church or my religion or whatever, my faith? And then my thing is, if it's important to you and it's something that's part of your life, then yes, because you want to go to a school that values that. Same thing with having kids, having a family. If that's something that's part of your life and important to you, you want a school that also values that and is aware of that. So, if you're trying to feel like you have to hide things from a school, it may just not be a good fit. And you're probably going to be mad when you get there and they don't like those things. So I think, read the room is important through the entire interview process, because you just never know who you'll be interviewing with. So good point. All right, that's all of our questions. Thank you so much. I feel like y'all are both ready. Keep practicing, of course, but I think y'all did great. And I really appreciate y'all being our first volunteers of the season.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. All right. I know we went overtime for this one. My bad. And I have to work tomorrow. I really do have 41 patients on my schedule. So thank you guys for attending. Y'all did awesome. This was a little bit indicative of what our mock interviews are like. They are an hour though, so a little bit more questions and then lots of feedback, and then we send you a written review afterwards. So if you need help, we'll send out the replay. It'll have links and everything, but happy to help and get y'all on the schedule for a mock interview. Or if you need anything, you know where to find me. Reach out, email, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. Try to help you guys out. Thanks, guys.